Hello, it's Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland. When I was growing up, the Soviet Union were the enemy. We went through the Korean War, the Vietnam War. Uh, the communists were the black hats, and the free world, led by the leader of the free world, the United States, were the white hats, uh, helping nations to retain their freedom, democracy, liberty, and international laws were put in place to try and learn lessons from the horrors of World War II, uh, the so called rules based order. And all of that was crap. As far as I see, looking back upon decades of propaganda, I see that the West just completely lied to everybody about what is human rights, because human rights and international law need to be applied universally. I think no one can argue with me on that point. And yet here we see uh, the West exposed, the Western media, fuck the CNN and the BBC for your portrayal of what is a textbook case of genocide in Gaza. We saw it with the 9-month blockade and the genocidal ethnic cleansing of Armenians by Israel's ally Azerbaijan. But we just thought that it was maybe because Armenia was too small, too insignificant. But now we know the truth, that the Zionist control of the media and the politicians, especially of Washington, D.C., with that corrupt little system which allows politicians to take money and be bribed, which in turn controls the UK, because the UK is a diminished nobody on the international scene without its friend, the United States. And because Australia and New Zealand, my nations, are still colonies of the UK, whatever London says, they just follow along. I'm ashamed of the Albanese government for failing to protest the genocidal acts by Israel. October the 7th, it didn't start on that day. More than 70 years of oppression after the British post World War One gave the nod for Zionists to set up their own country. But the Balfour Declaration didn't say anything about Israel taking over all of Palestine, by the way, and neither did the British have any right as protectors of Palestine to hand over any territory, by the way. And even if you study the Balfour Declaration, it says that the Palestinian rights should be recognised. So where is any of that in today's Israel, where we see the acts of settlers destroying property, killing people in the West Bank, for example? It's nothing to do with Hamas, is it? And as for October the 7th, yes, horrific time. But when you look at the facts, that the so-called Israeli defense, actually it's an offense force, took 6 or 7 hours apparently to respond in probably the world's most militarized border. Who told them to stand by? Who told them to pull back? Especially after Egypt and others had warned the Netanyahu government that something was brewing. Who set the defences back and allowed that to happen as an excuse for genocidal ethnic cleansing? Who was that? And of the more than 1,000 Israelis who were tragically killed, a horrific day, how many of those were actually killed by Israeli Apache gunships? How many Israelis were killed by tanks firing into kibbutzes? We've seen the videos. There were no 40 beheaded babies. Every piece of crap that comes out of the Zionist propaganda machine has been shown to be lies. Uh, you know, Hamas control centers under hospitals. I'm sorry, but if you haven't woken up yet, the young people, uh, the young generation, especially in the West, have had enough, and they're all so brave. I'm so proud of them, standing up as they've done in previous generations for Vietnam and other wars, and said this is unacceptable. Uh, the political elite have been protecting a genocidal regime with their plan for ethnic cleansing to get rid of all the Palestinians from their indigenous lands. And the irony is that those Israeli leaders, most of them anyway, are not even Semitic people. They're from places like Eastern Europe. They've become uh, you know, settlers in the Holy Lands, and that gives them the right to do whatever they like to a Semitic people called the Palestinian Arabs. Yes, you heard me right. The Palestinian Arabs are a Semitic people. So anyone doing wrong to them is doing an anti Semitic act. But every time I hear people saying, oh, this is anti Semitic if you criticize Israel, actually, it's the reverse. If you don't uh, criticize the genocidal attacks that have killed more than 30,000 Palestinian civilians, children, women, then you're an anti Semite. And that's why I'm ashamed of Australia and New Zealand in particular. You would stand up for the rights of the Timorese people, for example, who fought for independence from their oppressors, right? Uh, it's the correct thing to do, and it's consistent with international law, the ICCPR, self determination. Uh, you didn't stand up for the rights of Armenians and their indigenous lands from the invading Azerbaijanis who came from Central Asia. Uh, you didn't stand up and say no when Azerbaijan did a 9-month genocidal blockade of starvation. You obviously thought that that was acceptable, and so probably uh, did the Israelis think it was acceptable because they have just followed the Azerbaijanis' lead, their ally. We buried my neighbour's son. He was butchered on the territory of Armenia as the Azerbaijanis attacked using Israeli weapons. We know the horrors that have been inflicted upon this part of the world as Israel sets up its bases in Azerbaijan, ready to poke Iran into a proxy war. Using Armenians as pawns. We see the Israeli oppression of Armenians in the uh, Armenian Quarter in Jerusalem, where it's common practice for Israelis to spit on Christians like Armenians. Such is the depth of racism within Israeli society. So I would ask, uh, after 7 months of war and failing to achieve any military objective that they set out, uh, I would ask Israelis, some of whom are brave and who have protested against the war, and some who are very courageous and trying to protect the food convoys for starving Palestinians from the racist settlers that have tried to stop this food and other essential goods. I would ask, are the acts, the genocidal acts of the Netanyahu government against the orders of the highest courts in the world, uh, are these acts going to destroy Israel itself? Is the memory of the Holocaust itself going to be diminished because you, as survivors of genocide or descendants of the survivors of genocide, now commit your own genocide? The jig is up. Nobody believes your propaganda anymore. The world is ashamed. And here in Armenia, we understand the pain that Zionism has inflicted upon the people of the world, and how close the world is to a much wider conflict as Israel strikes out against Lebanon, Syria, anybody who stands in their way. The Zionist government thinks that it's actually their right to do whatever they like in so-called self-defense, when in fact Zionists themselves have been oppressing uh, Palestinian people who are indigenous to those lands. I don't want to wake up and see any more sights of Palestinian fathers carrying their headless children. I don't want to see uh, any more bloodshed. Israel has got to be stopped because clearly it can't stop itself. The uh, Biden administration has conducted such a shameful act, as has Rishi Sunak in the UK, and undermined everything that the West has stood for. And I'm afraid that my white hats have become the black hats, and Russia and China must be laughing because the West can no longer talk to anyone about morality, human rights, because we have managed to undermine everything that we built and everything that we fought for during World War One and World War Two. I'm ashamed that my governments haven't recognised Palestine. Australia and New Zealand must do so immediately after the courageous recognitions by Spain and Norway and those wonderful people in Ireland. We have to listen to the young people. They are our conscience. They are our future leaders. And we have to stop this propaganda controlling our media, because that has fucked up all our media. Nobody is going to see any relevance in traditional media anymore. And those media moguls are basically shooting themselves in the foot. They will no longer have a product to sell because everyone's getting their news from social media and other ways. So my message to the people listening is to do whatever you can to stop this. I don't care whether you're Jewish or not. This has nothing to do with anti-Jewish. It's anti-Zionism. There is a huge difference between the Jewish faith, of which I've seen tremendous support from Torah Jews to for the Palestinian people. This has got nothing to do with being against ordinary Israelis, as long as they are not racist. This has got everything to do with just simple human rights, which we all should treasure. My white hats have become black hats, and I'm ashamed, and it must stop now. As I say, free Artsakh, I also say free Palestine, because the indigenous people that have lived there for millennium in both places must not be oppressed, and they must return to their homes in peace and in dignity without any more of this savagery, this barbaric savagery that we see day to day. Thank you for listening. This is Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland.